2019, and this is Globespan 24/7 News Week in Review. My name is Shakima Day. We'll take a look at some of the major stories for the week, beginning Monday, September 16 to Friday, September 20th, 2019. On Monday, following his meeting with officials from the Carter Center, President David Granger made a public address to the nation earlier this week, reiterating that he has no hand in general elections. However, he said he is now awaiting a recommendation from the Guyana Elections Commission to name an election state. Let's take a look back at that report.
While declaring that the Guyana Elections Commission has a constitutional obligation to ensure that everything necessary would be done to deliver credible elections, President David Granger also noted that the election body must maintain its independence and the integrity of the electoral process. According to the Guyanese head of state, he emphasized repeatedly that it is imperative to provide every assistance to the Commission to enable it to conduct credible elections at the earliest possible time. He said his position remains the same.
I have acted expeditiously throughout the year to ensure that credible general and regional elections are held. I consulted the Elections Commission on 2 occasions. I consulted the leader of the opposition on 3 occasions to select a new chairman of the Elections Commission in accordance with the Constitution. I appointed Justice Claudette Singh as chairman of the Election Commission and administered the oath of office to her on the 29th of July. I have full confidence in the chairman's independence, integrity, and impartiality, and her intention and ability to perform the functions of her office in the best interests of the Guyanese people.
The President said his government is assured that the Commission is doing everything possible to prepare for this process.
The Elections Commission must be allowed to continue the task of preparing for the forthcoming general and regional elections. The Commission has an obligation to assure the public that it is ready to conduct credible elections and to advise the President of its readiness to do so. I could then dissolve Parliament and issue a proclamation appointing a date on which elections could be held in accordance with the Constitution. It would be reckless and irresponsible on my part to appoint a date for elections without the Commission's advice and assurance that it would be ready to conduct elections on such a date.
The President therefore calls on Guyanese to have confidence in the Elections Commission and urge everyone to uphold the Constitution and respect the decisions by GECOM. A governmental team met with Chairwoman retired Justice Claudette Singh and commissioners of the Elections Commission on September 13 to ascertain its readiness to conduct the elections. Further, a parliamentary opposition team met with the Commission also on September 10. GECOM commissioners will meet again tomorrow for their weekly statutory meeting. For Globespan 24/7 News, I'm Samuel Siknandan.
You'll hear now that Guyana's major power supply company, the Guyana Power and Light Inc., is set to introduce smart meters to the general populace next year in an effort to address the increasing demand of prepaid meters. Despite the company battling a few hiccups relating to the recent frequent power outages, Chief Executive Officer Albert Gordon disclosed that current prepaid metering systems have become increasingly popular in Guyana. He noted that the smart meters boast a number of new features.
Infrastructure, which are smart meters, which will allow customers to monitor their supply, but also allow us to monitor their voltage and whether or not they're out. So that will help us. And those meters will be able to provide both prepaid and postpaid capabilities. And we are in fact in the process of installing those, and we'll get that system up and running, I'd say sometime early next year, so customers can benefit from that.
According to the CEO, GPL currently has a customer base of over 200,000 Guyanese, most of which prefer the prepaid meter services over the postpaid. The meters have been unavailable for some time, and Gordon assured that the issue will be immediately rectified. We'll tell you now that 23 more Guyanese are set to return home to their homeland from the hurricane-ravaged Bahamas, while the first family of 5 arrived in Guyana recently, receiving a warm welcome. More in this report.
Stranded Guyanese who are battling the effects of Hurricane Dorian are set to return home soon. More than 23 persons have indicated their interest in returning to their homeland after facing the terrifying effects of the hurricane. Lieutenant Colonel Cresty Craig highlighted that since receiving word of Hurricane Dorian, the Civil Defense Commission (CDC) activated its response mechanism and are in contact with over 100 Guyanese living in the Bahamas who were affected.
To date, we have a live group that we keep in direct contact with almost 100 persons on a daily basis to identify their needs, to identify if people want to return. And through that mechanism, we're able to identify the 5 persons that came here.
Oren Grimmond and his family were all smiles as they arrived in Guyana on Sunday evening after surviving one of the most devastating hurricanes to hit the Caribbean. They were the first set of Guyanese living in the Bahamas to return. The Grimmond family was welcomed by Minister of State Don Hastings Williams, Minister of Citizenship Winston Felix, and Minister of Foreign Affairs Dr. Karen Cummins. Recounting the harrowing ordeal, Grimmond relayed to media operatives that he was elated to be home safe with his family.
The experience is horrifying. It's traumatizing to begin with, because as husband and father, I looked at my family, and there's nothing that I could have done to save my family. We were in the ceiling, and the water was rising. You know, it was terrifying because there's no way to escape this boiling water. You see, and so what we did, we kicked the door out. You know, and there's still no help. There's still no way I could save my family. The only thing I can say, and I can't exclude God out of it, because it was a miracle that happened that day. It was indeed a miracle because we prayed. So many people in Guyana were praying because they were watching the storm, and in no way we could get out of it alive without divine intervention.
The family will be housed at the Guyana Marriott Hotel for 5 days, then transported to Latham by Trans-Guyana Airways, all free of charge. Hurricane Dorian was the most powerful tropical cyclone on record to strike the Bahamas and is regarded as the worst natural disasters in the country's history. Dorian struck the Abaco Islands on September 1 with maximum sustained winds of 185 miles per hour, tying with the Labor Day hurricane of 1935 for the highest winds of an Atlantic hurricane ever recorded at landfall. Dorian went on to strike Grand Bahama at a similar intensity, stalling just north of the territory with unrelenting winds for about 24 hours. The resultant damage to the islands was catastrophic. Most structures were destroyed or swept out to sea, and at least 70,000 people were left homeless. For Globespan 24/7 News, I'm Samuel Saknandon.
The Supreme Court of Judicature moved one step closer to improving Guyana's justice system with the establishment of the Third Sexual Offences Court in the Cinderella County. You'll hear more. At the tune of $17.4 million, the county of ESSEQUIBO now benefits from the establishment of a sexual offences court following both Berbice and Demerara. The facility at the Study Supreme Court was funded by the British High Commission of Guyana and the United Nations Children Fund. Acting Chancellor of the Judiciary, Justice Yonette Cummings Edwards, in her remarks, stressed that previously the justice system was failing victims of sexual abuse, exposing them to a hostile system.
Cases involving sexual offenses were tried without victims having the benefit of a specialized courtroom. Victims had to give their evidence in open court, subject to rigorous cross-examination, cross-examination on their sexual history of the victims. Eliciting the story from the virtual complainant was indeed an emotional event for them. Then we moved from that to the proceedings in camera, and proceedings where the names of the victims were withheld from the press, and with restrictions from the type of questions to be asked in court. But that was not sufficient.
Justice Edwards posited that they have come a long way to ensure that victims or survivors of sexual violence are given a safe environment to testify without fear.
Time and again it has been mentioned that there's far-reaching emotional, physical, social even, psychological and developmental effects on the victims of sexual offenses. We in the Supreme Court are not psychologists, but as judges and magistrates, we appreciate how the victims react, how they behave when they come to court to testify. Courts exist to do justice, and justice is not done when even the very victims and even the defendants are treated in an insensitive and hostile manner by our very justice system.
Meanwhile, Minister of Social Protection Amna Ali related that the government of today has the responsibility in ensuring that Guyanese and victims of sexual abuse have complete faith in Guyana's justice system.
The raise of the scourge of sexual violence in Guyana and the need for robust interventions for specialized infrastructural requirements in courts for victims of sexual violence was something that could no longer be overlooked by our judicial system.
The first sexual offences court opened in 2017 in Georgetown. In May of 2018, Berbice followed suit. The specialized court has a main courtroom that will house the defense counsel, prosecutors, and jurors. It has a closed-circuit system linked up to the special measures room that will allow victims to give evidence without having to face the perpetrators. Reporting for Globespan 24/7 News, Shakima Day. Report. An argument gone wrong resulted in one man losing his life allegedly at the hand of his own brother. Dead is Satnarayan Jatan, 47, a painter by profession. Globespan 24/7 News understands that the two brothers were at their mother's home located at Lot 471 Charlotte Street Enterprise, East Coast Demerara, when the incident occurred. Police in a press statement disclosed that the two were imbibing at around 15:30 hours on Monday when an argument ensued. Moments later, Jatan was discovered with a stab wound to his abdomen. He was immediately rushed to the C.C. Nicholson Hospital at Nabakalis, where he was pronounced dead on arrival. The suspect is currently in police custody, assisting with investigations. We'll tell you now that following the ruling by High Court Judge Simone Morris Ramlal that the COI into the affairs of the Georgetown Mayor and City Council was blinded, political commentator and witness into the recently concluded COI, Raman Gaskin, is of the view that the matter is far from over. Kingsley Bryan reports.
Political commentator Raymond Gaskin is of the view that the ruling by High Court Judge Morris Ramlal on the M&CC Commission of Inquiry matter is misguided. Gaskin, who himself was called to testify in the COI, is adamant that the court cannot rescind the recommendations of the COI. Gaskin, in an invited comment, told Globespan 24/7 News that the judge cannot make determinations on a technical matter.
The judge cannot rescind the findings of the COI on a technical matter. The COI was conducted by the former Chancellor, Kennard. But the criminal wrongdoing, if any, of the gentleman could still be pursued by the police and they could still lock him up. They don't need COI to lock him up for criminal wrongdoing.
According to Gaskin, that should not be the conclusion of the matter.
It ain't done yet, as far as I can tell. And they can still appeal that decision. The matter is not over.
The outspoken commentator contends that the local government commission was not blinded in the actions to establish a COI, but followed a due course of action as stipulated by law.
No. The decision of the local government commission, which is a constitutional body, their decision to have an inquiry into a matter is not a matter for the judge to pronounce on. We have inquiries all the time on all kinds of different things. We just had an inquiry into Deputy Commissioner Alves. We had an inquiry into all kinds of things.
Gaskin, who was once charged with conducting an audit into the state of that very council, stressed that guidelines within the Municipal Act allows for the establishment of a COI.
As a matter of fact, the Municipal and District Council Act requires an inquiry before you fire a person. It's a requirement of the law to have an inquiry before you do these things. You have to have it if they have complaints of wrongdoing. Before you take action against the people, you have to have this inquiry, and which they did.
Gaskin said the matter is far from over, and the COI was a requirement. Apart from that, he said the police are yet to pronounce on the issue as it relates to the criminal aspects, but may be awaiting the full council to approach them. He maintains King's reappointment will not be the best decision for the council.
No, the judge didn't reinstate him. The judge did not reinstate him. No, they don't have to reinstate him. He's been fired, and he contended, and they could pay him off and let him go. But they don't have to take him back. Taking Royston back, there will be wrong decision. Bad.
Globespan 24/7 News made an attempt to get Justice Cecil Kennard, who chaired the COI, to comment on the court ruling, but calls to his assigned number went unanswered. The Local Government Commission says it is now awaiting the written court judgment before it makes any further decisions. For Globespan 24/7 News, this is Kingsley Bryan.
Good evening, and here's a recap of our headlines for September 16th through 20th. Guyanese U.S.-based murder accused to be extradited soon. 3 immigrants killed, 11 detained after a boat sinks in Puerto Rico. Oil gains up by 8% following attacks on Saudi. Canada's Prime Minister faces criticisms over blackface makeup. And Amazon announces plans to switch to renewable energy. Here are the details in tonight's news. Guyanese Shahid Roger Khan, upon arrival into Guyana following his deportation from the United States of America on Friday, was taken into custody for the murder of African rights activist Ronald Waddell and former boxing coach Donald Allison. This information is according to Khan's lawyer, Glenn Hanuman. The lawyer said Khan will be kept in custody as the investigation into the 2 cases continue. A report said that after taking Khan at the Guyana Police Force's Criminal Investigations Department, Eve Leary, the lawyer said as far as he was aware, police investigations and the Director of Public Prosecution Chambers had advised that they do not have evidence on those matters to charge Khan as of yet. And the Guyanese community in New York will be joining the first ever edition of the Walk the Talk, the Health for All Challenge in the United States, being held over 4 miles in New York's Central Park. The walk is also expected to bring together people from all over the world for a celebration of health on the eve of the United Nations General Assembly. The event is free and open to all and will be held on this coming Sunday, being September 22nd at 8:30 a.m. The World Health Organization has urged participants to ensure that they are physically healthy and prepared for the various activities being offered during the event, ranging from walking or running to enjoying the activities staged at starting and ending point. And several men, women, and children from the Bahamas have been denied entry into the U.S. after attempting to flee the devastation by Hurricane Dorian. People from the Caribbean are normally allowed in the U.S. with a visa as long as they fly there, have passports, and hold a clean record. This rule was extended to also include boat arrivals amid growing fears that a major humanitarian crisis could now kill thousands in the storm-battered country. But desperate refugees who had boarded a ferry for Florida on Sunday were removed at the last minute, with crew members telling them they would not be allowed into the U.S. without a visa. An announcement told passengers without such paperwork to disembark immediately. More than 130 people in total were taken off the boat, including several children. Police in Trinidad and Tobago suspects that Special Olympics athlete Sean Gibson, 34, has been murdered. His body was discovered at the back of a woodland vegetable stall along M2 Link Road on Saturday morning by the owner of the stall, who came to set up his place for business at 8:10 a.m. According to reports, the face of the gold medalist and the former football captain appeared to have been bashed in. Sister of the man said that the family is deeply saddened by the man's death. Gibson's sister said that she is unaware of any enemies that would want to end his life in such a gruesome way. And Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau campaign moved to contain a growing furor Thursday after a yearbook photo surfaced of him in the blackface at 2001 Arabian Nights costume party, and two other similar incidents came to light. With his bid for re-election just a month away, the 47-year-old begged Canadians to forgive him. He emphasized that he understands how terrible of a thing it was to do, and he should not have done that. Times magazine published a photo on Wednesday last, saying it was taken from the yearbook from the West Point Grey Academy, a private school in British Columbia, where the Prime Minister worked as a teacher before going into politics. It shows the then 29-year-old Prime Minister in a turban and robe with dark makeup on his hands, face and neck. Blackface, which more prevalent in the past, particularly in the entertainment industry, involves white people maintaining their faces darker and is widely condemned as a racist caricature. And as we continue to follow what's happening in England's Parliament, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has been accused by one of the country's former leaders of obstructing Parliament by shutting down the legislature for 5 weeks as a landmark legal challenge to suspension wrapped up Thursday last at the UK Supreme Court. But a government lawyer warned the country's most senior judges, who will rule next week on whether the Prime Minister broke the law, not to enter a minefield by meddling in political decisions. Meanwhile, the European Union and Britain announced new talks on an elusive Brexit divorce deal, even as they squabbled over whether or not the UK had brought any new ideas to the table. The UK's top court must decide whether Johnson acted illegally by sending lawmakers home just weeks before the country is due to leave the EU on October 31st. Turning our attention to news in the United Kingdom still, the Kremlin has denied it is holding British national Paul Whelan as a collateral for a diplomatic trade. Responding to a statement made by British Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt, which warned Russia against using Mr. Whelan as a diplomatic pawn, Vladimir Putin's official spokesperson Dmitry Peskov insisted Russia was driven only by reasons of internal security. Peskov in a statement said that Russia has never used people as pawns in diplomatic games, but rather the country do counter activities directed against people suspected of same. The Kremlin spokesperson said he had no comment to make on the possibility of a swap with Russian national Maria Butina. Ms. Butina pleaded guilty to conspiring to act as a foreign agent. And Israel's citizens will vote for the second time in less than 6 months in an election that is widely seen as de facto confidence vote on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The ballot came at a time for the country's longest-serving prime minister, with the right-wing incumbent facing formidable challenges to his reign and possible criminal charges in 3 corruption cases. The most recent opinion polls showed the prime minister's party running neck and neck with the centrist Blue and White Party, headed by former military chief Benny Gantz. Neither is expected to secure a majority. And oil prices rose more than 1% on Friday, with Brent set for its biggest weekly gain since January, lifted by rising Middle East tension and supply concerns after an attack on Saudi Arabia's energy industry last weekend. Brent crude rose 74 cents, or 1.2%, to $65.14 a barrel in Western Texas Intermediate, while crude rose 87 cents, or 1.5%, to $59 a barrel. For the week, Brent was set to rise 8.1%, its biggest gain since January, while WTI was on track for a 7.7% increase, the most recent since June. And finally in the news, across the globe Friday, students and employees are walking out of schools and businesses in a global climate strike to urge leaders to get serious about fighting climate change. And that includes Amazon, where more than 1,500 employees have pledged to walk out. It looks like their efforts may already be yielding results based on the responses they have so far received. The strikers announced goals including Amazon switching to 100% renewable energy by 2030. Amazon's founder and CEO yesterday announced that Amazon would use 100% green energy by 2030, among other actions to help fight climate change. And that's all for today. I am Whitney Prasad, broadcasting live from New York, New York. Do have a great rest of your week, and thank you for watching. Back to Shakima in Guyana.
Residents of LEOPOLD Street, Working-Rust, Georgetown earlier on Wednesday blocked off the streets and burnt tires over the alleged shooting death of one of its residents. Globespan 24/7 News was on scene and filed this report. It was a chaotic scene earlier today at LEOPOLD Street, Working-Rust, Georgetown, when residents came out to express anger at the shooting death of one of their fellow residents by police officers. Not only were the streets blocked by the residents, but they were also seen engaged in burning tires, firing gunshots into the air, and shattering glass bottles. The residents are demanding justice for 35-year-old Odingo Williams, who was allegedly shot and killed at the hands of the police yesterday. Globespan 24/7 News understands that the man was on his way home to his wife when he was reportedly shot by the police for reasons unknown. Sister of the now dead man, Omisha Humphrey, disclosed that they will not rest until justice is served.
What's going on, T-White? He was going on, T-White. He ain't do no crime or nothing. They shoot you up, and when they realize that he's dead, they ignore him. And the backland by sheep. Yes, and not that sheep. And what said? He was right now. She feeling it. We need justice.
The distraught wife of the man relayed to the media what occurred at the time of the incident.
Justice, so we need justice. That's why the police were killing on the fence. The police were killing. We want the gun and the money back. And the motorbike, the yellow motorbike and the ID. We want them.
Family members were unclear as to what prompted the alleged shooting incident, but remain firm to continue their cry for justice. Globespan 24/7 will bring a later update into this incident. For Globespan 24/7 News, Shakima Day. Head of the Environmental Protection Agency, Dr. Vincent Adams, says that unrestricted access to oil rigs is necessary so as to ensure proper environmental and safety standards are adhered to. Speaking at a recent press conference, the EPA director noted that regulators must be able to make unexpected and unannounced visits to operations of oil and gas operators.
There should be no prevention or stiff arming of government employees or people who provide oversight to go on that rig at any time. Of course, you know, it's the responsibility of us, not anytime we go, it's not to interfere or interrupt the work. But we should not be prevented to visit the site at any time.
Dr. Adams said it is important to guard against complacency in these types of environments.
We have to monitor, which means that we have to be out there. Now, ideally, you know, we would love to be out there 24/7. But if at this current time we're not prepared to do that, it doesn't mean that they're not operating safely. They're operating safely through the conditions of the permit. We have to trust also the operators. And I guarantee you the operators do not want for anything to happen. They know that if anything happens, their operations are going to be shut down. And it's not going to be, first of all, in terms of the economics of the company or the branding of the company. So you trust, but you still have to verify.
While he acknowledged that the requisite local safety standards are not yet in place to really monitor operations entirely, he stated that this should not be seen as there is no proper oversight.
But we do adopt international standards in the interim Of course, we do not just blindly adopt these standards. We look at the standards and see if how they apply and even make adjustments, etc. But we do go through that process of making sure that what we judge to be safe and environmentally sound, that's what we impose on the contractors. In the meantime, however, we are in the process of very, very aggressively working towards getting to that point when we will have developed our local standard.
A national oil spill plan is still being developed in a multi-agency collaboration led by the Civil Defense Commission. The oil spill prevention strategy has been in development for some time. The last recorded environmental disaster was a cyanide spill in 1995 into the ESSEQUIBO River. We'll tell you now that the third annual Empowered Leadership Conference opened Wednesday on a high note with the U.S. Ambassador Sarah Ann Lynch emphasizing the need for women to be involved in changing the world. We'll tell you more in this report. Held under the theme Powerful, Transitioning from Inspiration to Action, the We Lead Caribbean Women's Leadership Conference began with a bang earlier today. The conference held at the Arthur Chang Convention Center saw the attendance of a number of businesswomen in Guyana and the Caribbean who eagerly awaited empowerment from a wide range of speakers, including Beyonce's publicist Yvette Noel Schreier and Ethiopian Princess Ariana McKenna. U.S. Ambassador Sarah Ann Lynch in her remarks urged women to become more involved in shaping the world. She stressed that women are humble superhumans who have the ability to transform the world.
You run companies, you deliver healthcare services, you implement policies that affect every level of society, and you take care of your families too. As Abigail just described, that is sometimes a hardship to do all of that at the same time. But that is why I'm so thrilled to hear her theme, or the theme, for this year's conference is Powerful. Just love that name. That's just great. Because that's exactly right. It is the power of women which will tip the scale, in my opinion, to a Guyana and a Caribbean that is prosperous, well-governed, and secure.
The ambassador firmly noted that when women are hired, businesses are bound to succeed.
And as women, we bring a lot. Don't underestimate what you bring. We bring a lot. We are one half of humanity, and there is so much data that supports the notion when you bring women into the political and economic life of a country, the GDP goes up and poverty rates go down. It's proven. Yes, thank you. It's proven that companies with more women in higher management positions achieve higher profits. It's simple, really. Hire women, and you will succeed.
Despite the focus being on women, men were also included in the mix as a number of men were seated in the audience. The conference aims to provide women with the tools and knowledge they need to start and grow their business. It concludes tomorrow. For Globespan 24/7 News, Shakima Day. Scores of protesters and members of the opposition People's Progressive Party flooded the streets in front of the Pegasus Hotel, protesting the coalition government, calling on their immediate resignation. Globespan 24/7 was on scene and filed this report. Close to 200 opposition supporters earlier today, dressed in their signature red, with placards mounted, assembled in front of the Pegasus Hotel calling for elections to be held and for the president and his cabinet members to remove from office. The president was set to address a business luncheon organized by the Guyana Manufacturing and Services Association at the hotel. The protest, which began around 10 hours, started peacefully, but the crowd erupted in cheers and boos when Public Infrastructure Minister David Patterson arrived on scene and attempted to enter. PPPC's presidential candidate, Irfan Ali, in his short comment, stressed that Guyana has now dived into a state of dictatorship.
It is very simple. Guyana is a state of dictatorship. We are not going dictatorship anymore. We are in a state of dictatorship. there's a group of people occupying the seats of government, and it's led by a dictator. That is it. The bottom line here is that Guyana is in a state of dictatorship, and we are not going to allow this dictatorship. We are not going to allow this dictatorship to start upon the people. We have to stand out. We have to protect this country from this dictatorship and its undeniable. And that is what we are fighting for.
PPPC's party secretary, Zulfikar Mustafa, lamented his disappointment in the February 2020 timeline outlined by GECOM chair Claudette Singh.
I'm very disappointed. I'm very, very disappointed. I thought election, because we have all the mechanisms in place, this very election should have been held. I don't know why the chairperson says that we should have election in February. So I am very disappointed, and I felt that we could have had election this year.
Opposition MP Priya Manikchand, who was on scene, aired her frustrations over the current political situation.
No regard, they are completely and the most free law of the land. Granger never did now. Until yesterday, today we somebody
Opposition leader Bar Jagdeo was present at the protest but withheld his comment. The protesters at one period clashed with law enforcement officers adorned with riot gear. The protest later disbanded moments before Jagdeo commenced his weekly press conference. For Globespan 24/7 News, Shakima Day. You'll hear now that several processes were put into motion on Thursday following the announcement by the Guyana Elections Commission that the earliest possible timeline that the Commission can conduct credible elections is February 2020. Some are saying that the President breached the Constitution by failing to name a date for the elections in a time-sensitive manner. But President David Granger is adamant that this is not the case.
Is abiding by the Constitution in the sense that it has allowed the Election Commission, an autonomous agency, to do its work. I cannot hold elections unless I receive advice that the Commission is ready. I mentioned a few minutes ago that we would end up with an Abuja situation in which the Commission was not ready, and elections which were to be held the very day had to be called off.
Granger confirmed his receipt of the letter from the Commission with their stipulated timeline, but noted that no proclamation shall be made until he is met with full cabinet.
I am going to meet my cabinet, and I will not discuss the contents of the communication until I have received the advice of my cabinet.
Thank you. The head of state said he has the full confidence in GECOM and is headed by a sober and prudent chairwoman, and as such will heed the advice coming from the said commission. President Granger, in response to the missive from the top Western countries, relayed that he is advising the foreign missions to allow the government to resolve the issues at hand. The President maintains that...
Very clear on the functions of the Commission. I would be in more grievous breach of the Constitution if I try to intrude or interfere in the work of the Commission. So I advise the foreign delegations or the foreign missions to allow the government of Guyana to resolve the issues. The
government is still compliant with all aspects of the sacred law of the land.
I am not in breach of the Constitution. As far as I'm concerned, in Guyana, the government of Guyana is complying with the Constitution. I've said what I've said about the receipt of advice from the chairman of the Commission. It is impossible for the executive to run the elections. I will not allow the executive to intrude. I will not print ballot papers. I will not train returning officers. I will not detail polling stations. This is the job of an agency. Let the agency do its work.
Several top Western countries have come together to issue a call to President David Granger to set an election date as soon as possible, following the announcement of an elections timeline. More in this report. Within a short time after news broke about the GECOM chair, retired Justice Claudette Singh, advising President David Granger on an election timeframe, several Western diplomats issued a joint statement. They included United States of America Ambassador to Guyana, Sarah Ann Lynch, United Kingdom High Commissioner to Guyana, Greg Quinn, and the European Union Ambassador to Guyana, Fernando Ponce-Canto. While these diplomatic representatives thanked the Guyana Elections Commission for devising a proposed elections timeframe for conducting general and regional elections, they said they deeply regret the surpassing of the September 18th deadline for elections. According to the statement, the government is currently in breach of the Constitution following its failure to adhere to the decisions of the Caribbean Court of Justice on June 18 and its subsequent orders. This situation comes at a great cost to the people of Guyana. The prevailing political uncertainty undermines Guyanese institutions, compromises economic opportunities, and delays development across all areas, including infrastructure, education, health, and social services. It also hinders our ability to support Guyana's developmental needs, the statement said. The Western diplomats therefore called upon the president to set an election date immediately in full compliance with Guyana's constitution. Reporting for Globespan 24/7 News, Shakima Day. In light of the protest action staged by supporters and officials of the opposition People's Progressive Party Civic outside of the Pegasus Hotel on Thursday, the government, through the Ministry of the Presidency, said it will not be tolerating acts of hooliganism, thuggery, and lawlessness. The massive protest action by the opposition People's Progressive Party, both inside and outside of the Pegasus Hotel yesterday, was cited as a deliberate act of hooliganism, one which will not be tolerated by the coalition government. In a Ministry of the Presidency issued statement, it said, open quote, "The lawlessness exhibited is not akin to a democratic political protest, but rather was a display of gross disrespect for the President, his office, the government, and the occasion that was being held at the time," end quote. President David Granger was the guest speaker at the Guyana Manufacturing and Services Association Business Luncheon, while the protests raged outside. In an unexpected move, PPPC supporters pulled out placards while the president began his speech, disrupting the event. The statement further noted that, open quote, "Peaceful and civilized protest action is a common occurrence in any democracy, but it becomes a sign of worry when a presidential candidate and a former president, who is a constitutional office holder, seeks to incite violence against the sitting head of state and ministers of the government during the execution of their official duties," end quote. This specific incident occurred just as the president was about to deliver his speech.
If you survive the hooliganism, well, apparently hooliganism has migrated.
The statement further highlighted two incidents occurring during the protests where Foreign Affairs Minister Dr. Karen Cummins was held hostage in her vehicle and the heckling of Public Infrastructure Minister David Patterson. The government described these events as unacceptable and said it should be also condemned by all right-thinking Guyanese. President Granger has assured the country that every lawful measure will be taken to guarantee the safety of ministers of government and to prevent a breakdown of law and order in the country. For Globespan 24/7 News, Shakima Day. We'll tell you now that the Alliance for Change has joined the call by the government for an extension of the elections timeline in the parliament. Chairman of the smaller coalition partner and Public Security Minister Kemraj Ramjitan said given the new developments as it relates to the holding of elections, an extension is now required.
Constitutional requirement to ensure that the elections 2020 are held without being challenged is the requirement to get approval by 2/3 majority of the National Assembly, as is required by Article 106(7). We will urge the opposition to ensure formal constitutionality of that elections by giving its support in the Assembly to the extension now needed for the new set date. The opposition must not be seen to be frustrating this necessary parliamentary support.
Ramjitan relayed that the government has always catered for an extension of the parliament, but were always rejected in their proposals by the opposition.
It's very timely now in view of the fact that the new date will be set, in view of the GECOM chairman saying that 20 February is when they will be ready, that we should make that public and as a party, and that the PVP and the opposition should go to Parliament to ensure that we get a 2/3 majority.
The party shared the view that stronger emphasis was not placed on the need to return to Parliament because they were awaiting a formal announcement from the Guyana Elections Commission. AFC Treasurer and former Minister of Business Dominic Gaskin, noting that calling for an extension, before such a time would have proved problematic. The party
said...
We did
ask that before, but we cannot go to the National Assembly, table a motion to extend the 3-month period for an indefinite period of time. Had we asked for an extension up to, let's say, the 31st of December, before being advised by GECOM, what would have happened? We would still find ourselves in a bit of a dilemma. So we needed to hear from GECOM first.
It is optimistic that the opposition will heed the call for an extension given recent developments. The AFC says it finds the timeline provided by GECOM for the holding of credible elections to be satisfactory and maintains its commitment to the governing of coalition parties. President Granger on Wednesday said he would be meeting with his cabinet to discuss the letter and a possible date. However, Minister Ramjitan noted that the president met with only a few ministers and is expected to meet with the full cabinet next Tuesday. And finally, a top government official has revealed that Region 4 has the highest number of trafficking in persons, according to statistics recorded by the TIP unit. We have more in this report. Public Security Minister Kemraj Ramjitan made this revelation earlier today at a workshop on trafficking in persons hosted by the Supreme Court of Judicature of Guyana and the Judicial Education Institute, Guyana. According to Minister Ramjitan, from 2018 to June of this year, the Guyana Police Force Trafficking in Persons Unit has investigated over 40 cases of TIP, with majority of the victims originating from Region 4.
The Guyana Police Force Trafficking in Persons Unit investigated 14 cases of suspected trafficking in persons, and those 14 cases had involved 50 alleged victims, 21 of whom were under 18 years of age, and out of those 32 cases, we had 52 suspects. These investigations resulted in 3 convictions, 1 for trafficking in person, 1 for employing a child on premises selling intoxicating liquor, and 1 for conspiracy to commit a felony. The 18 statistic there is 55% of the total alleged victims were below 26 years old, while 45, well, of course, were over that. The location, again, with the most is Region 4, accounted for approximately all of the alleged occurrences. And this is all part of the status of the densely populated, being the most densely. And because of the sexual exploitation, it happening with those commercial centers that would have these activities.
The minister relayed that despite these statistics, Guyana continues to maintain top-tier status, according to the U.S. State Department of State TIP report for 2017. He posited that this is due to the continuous efforts being made by the TIP unit to combat the problem in Guyana.
In 2019, the report maintained us with the highest grade, Tier 1. And that also occurred in 2017 and 2018 reports. In the 3 previous reports, Guyana was placed in Tier 2, and that was since 2012, and then in Tier 3, it is called Tier 2 watch list. They start watching you. That happened earlier, but up to 2016. But because of the work the task force has been doing, because we have also been going for public awareness in all the various markets and schools and so on, it's a lot of work that's been done. And also started prosecuting, investigating, prosecuting, and even getting some convictions. The State Department has regarded us as going very, very high. These men who are doing this thing, the evidence, however, to catch them, sometimes we cannot get because they have their networks of other underlings ensuring that it happens to their profits. And then you only catch the small fishes. We are trying as best as possible to ensure that we can catch the big fishes.
Minister Ramchitan mentioned that the report put forward several recommendations. This, he said, will be continuously implemented to aid the eradication of TIP in Guyana. Guyana leads several Caribbean states in this regard, with only the Bahamas holding Tier 1 status. Antigua and Barbuda, Haiti, Jamaica, St. Lucia, St. Martin, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Suriname and Trinidad and Tobago have Tier 2 status, while Barbados and Belize were placed in Tier 3. Trafficking in persons in Guyana is governed by the Combating of Trafficking in Persons Act 2005 and came into effect on April 7, 2005. Reporting for Globespan 24/7 News, Shakima Day. That has brought us to the end of Globespan 24/7's News Week in Review. Remember to like our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel for the latest news in Guyana, the Caribbean, and around the world. I am Shakima Day, wishing you a safe and productive week ahead. On behalf of our news and technical team, until next time, to have a pleasant rest of the evening.